Shalom, everybody. Akiva Gersh here. So glad to be talking Aliyah today with Jonathan Feldstein. Jonathan Feldstein made Aliyah in 2004, married and raising 6 children in the Judean mountains. He's a longtime Jewish nonprofit professional. As president of the Genesis 123 Foundation, he works closely with many Christians who support Israel, building bridges in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. Jonathan, so glad to be talking to you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Akiva. It's good to be with you.
Wonderful. So let's just jump right into it. Right, Aliyah is obviously a big deal, a big decision, a big life changer. So what for you personally motivated you to make that jump, make Aliyah in 2004?
Well, I'd wanted to make Aliyah since I was 15, and we can come back to that. And my wife did from more or less the same age. But it's actually very funny. We had built a new house in the U.S., and the taxes went from normal to 3 times that, and unaffordable, and not just unaffordable, but unjustifiable. And I said, we can't afford here. There's no purpose in staying here. Let's move. And it was a big trauma when my father died some years before that. And I had said, we're not going to make Aliyah. My wife had the temerity to put back on the table, well, if we're going to consider moving, we should consider moving to Israel. That was the summer of 2003. I said to a colleague of mine who lives here, I really want to make Aliyah. And he kept, and I hope I can say this, he said to me, Jonathan, every time I see you whining about not making Aliyah, he said to me, just get off your ass and do it already. And 6 months later, I was on a pilot trip, and I came here with it was the tail end of the second Intifada. I came here with the commitment at the time with 5 kids. I would only make Aliyah if I could find work. I believe that both the increase in our taxes and my ability to find work that week were both wonderful divine interventions, with God giving me a big wink and saying, you can do it. And I came home, told my wife we can do it. 2 weeks later, I gave notice in my job. My boss didn't believe me. And that was April, and May, June, July. 4 months later, we were on a plane. Crazy.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So a few things I actually want to ask you questions about based on what you just said. Work I definitely want to get to, but 15, you said you wanted to make Aliyah since you were 15. What's happening there? Why already as a young teenager were you already feeling this desire to live in Israel?
So my father was born here, had an accent until the day he died, always called me Jonathan because he had an accent. So even when he was speaking to me about doing my homework or raking the leaves or taking up garbage or anything, it was always with an Israeli inflection. And our first trip to Israel, I was 15, and I felt at home. I felt that this was a place I wanted to be. I felt life was better here. Now, strangely, and I don't know how I perceived this, but I remember it vividly as a feeling that I couldn't get out of me. I was a kid myself, but I understood that this is a better place to raise children than in America. And I said, I want to be part of it. I want to be part of building a Jewish future, and not to dismiss substantive Jewish life in the diaspora. There is, but I wanted to be on the 50-yard line, not in the bleachers. And just knew it was always my goal until that trauma of my father dying and not wanting to take my kids away from my mother and my mother from my kids, which we obviously overcame. But yeah, 15 years old, we went back to my father's old neighborhood. And not only did it feel like, even if you can go back after, I don't know, it must have been 20, 25 years since he left or more, and go back to his old neighborhood and start seeing friends and old neighbors and him being re-embraced as if he were at home, as well as his family, plus just being here. That was it. That's what called me to want to do this.
Amazing. I mean, if I can ask a little bit of a personal question, if I understand correctly, your father did not see you make Aliyah. If he did, though, what do you think he would have said? What do you think his reaction would have been?
Emotional.
Sorry.
It's okay. The year before he died, we were actually planning on making a trip here together to talk about setting up a branch of his business that I would operate. So, and then he was diagnosed with cancer, and a year later he died. My father would have loved him, would have been really proud of us. If he were still alive, his grandson, who's named for him, would not be named for him, but would still be a paratrooper in the Army today. And my father would go crazy about that. And my father would have been the first one on an airplane when his great grandson was born. No, he understood. It was home for him too, even though he left when he was 17 and built his life in America.
Right, right. Obviously there's like a really big emotional piece for, people who make Aliyah, for family members of people who make Aliyah. I mean, I'm just thinking as you're sharing, your very personal story with your father, that my grandparents, they grew up in Poland. And when they were very, very young, they were part of Zionist movements in Poland. And, when they were young, they thought they were going to come to this land. Even before the state was established, their life took them in different directions. They left Poland. Right. In the mid to late 1920s. Thank God before the war, most of their family did not make it out before the war. They went to Canada and America and never came here except to visit a couple of times. But my grandparents didn't get to see me make Aliyah. They died many years before. I was just thinking, like, that would have been such a powerful thing for them to see this kind of full circle happen. And
I think about that often. I think about that often. My youngest son, who was born here, the one of my six, who was born in Israel, is named for my great-grandfather and my father's first cousin, both of whom were killed by the Nazis. And my great-grandfather, obviously, Israel was central, and he was successful in getting 4 of his children out of Poland to Israel, to America, wherever he could in the 1930s, because he knew he needed to do that. And my father's cousin, who was a little boy who was like 4 or 5 years old when he was killed, was probably old enough to have started davening and knowing that Israel was important. And I think about this little boy who, if he were alive today, would be an old man, looking at his namesake born here, which is something that we take for granted, both the physical process of birth and where and how babies are born, but to have your namesake, a person named for you, born in Jerusalem, for which you could only pray in the 1930s and 40s, it blows me away all the time.
It's crazy. It's really crazy. I can, again, very much relate with that. 2 of our 4 children have names from my grandparents, and one of them was born in Jerusalem, and it's powerful. It's really powerful. I feel like, oftentimes, like, when we make Aliyah, we're not just bringing ourselves home. First of all, of course, we know we're bringing our children home, right? And the future generations, but there is a sense of like bringing the past with us, for those who couldn't.
It's funny, just as you're saying that, I'm looking behind myself on the screen, and all those black and white pictures are a sample of, happens to be on that side of the window, my father's family, the people who were here. And there's a picture of my father as a little boy, but it is home. And even if they never made it here, they aspired to be here. They dreamt and prayed to be here, and we have the zchut to be doing it. And it's very easy living here to forget that in the day-to-day life. But when you're able to sit and just pause for a minute and think about it, much less articulate it like we're doing now, it's it blows you away.
Right.
Blows you away.
Right, mamash. Okay, Jonathan, so you mentioned that you made Aliyah with 5 children. You had one more child here who was born in Israel. If I can ask you, what was it like for you to make Aliyah with children? What was it like for your children to make Aliyah? What was it like to have a child born here? All those different pieces. Obviously, making Aliyah with children adds a whole other element and dimension to the Aliyah process. So if you can speak about that for a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah. So one of the smartest things that we did, which was probably effective, is a month or so after I had my pilot trip, my wife came to look for schools, communities, and we decided we would invest to bring along my daughter, who was then just turning 11. Very social. We figured if she bought in, there would be a positive trickle down with the other kids who were at the time approximately 9, 7, 5, and 3, or 2 even then, and that was good. I mean, she my oldest daughter, in a couple of days into that trip, the pilot trip of May of 2004, said, I want to live in Israel, but I don't want to leave America, which is a normal thing. And I mean, of course, we had lots of drama, like you're ruining my life and all of that for any preteen. And so any trigger will trigger an 11, 12-year-old girl or boy. So that was just ours. When we made Aliyah, it's very interesting. Could write a book about it, because each kid at his or her own age level and academic level had their challenges. My daughter was the only Ola in her class at the time. Wow. Now that's rare, but where we live in Efrat at least. But she was the only Ola and was picked on and had a bad time and wasn't in a particularly good environment. So we switched schools, and she acclimated and made new best friends for life. Literally, her best friends were from the age of 12. Wow. And my second daughter, who's academically brilliant, knew that she was not that any of my kids are shabby, but she has this different level, and she knew that her Hebrew was not as good, so she would bring other girls home to play after school, but she would speak to them in English even though they were Hebrew speakers, because she didn't want to, she knew her Hebrew wasn't as good, and we actually had to send her to art therapy in order to get her to flourish again. That was our investment there. My 7-year-old, you were on the plane, and anyone who's not even considered Aliyah but has come to Israel knows that it's emotional landing here, and people clap. It's probably the only place in the world where people clap when you land. I've been to a lot of places. And so we're a plane load of Olim, right? You remember that.
Right.
And the plane lands, and there's applause and tears, and a 7-year-old kid behind me yells out, "I hate Israel. Put me on the next plane back to America right now." And for the first month, that was her mantra. And now she's completely acclimated. She's been on shlichut in Australia. She's been on shlichut in Ethiopia. And by the way, I should say all of my kids are glad and grateful that we moved now. I mean, they've made their lives here. My 5-year-old was pre-academic, so he had verbal English and basically no Hebrew, but he had no reading or writing in any language. So his adjustment was difficult. I mean, funny things that just happened. Yeah, he's the one who's the paratrooper now, who told us after an accident the year we made Aliyah, you probably remember this, a soldier jumped and his parachute didn't open properly and he died, a young man from our community, and he was 6 years old at the time, and said, "Don't worry, Iman Abba, when I'm in the army, I won't jump out of airplanes." And now he's got a red beret on his shoulder and is a paratrooper and has already done the jump. So that's all good. It's fine. Right. It's ironic. And my 3-year-old, within a couple of weeks, came home and started playing with her Barbies in Hebrew. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Whatever it was that made me perceive that raising children in Israel was better, we've have the privilege of living that out.
That's amazing, right? Because you bring that part of your story back from when you were 15 years old, coming here and feeling that and sensing that. And I'm just listening to you, I'm thinking how amazing it is that you got to see all of your children in different stages of their lives make Aliyah and go through their own very personal and unique acclimation process, of course, including your last child who was born here. So you have like this full gamut. You really could write a book about it. You can give a course on bringing.
And all of those things are normal, and it would have been great if somebody had said, expect this range of behavior. And, we're parents. We're not always prepared for everything that throw our way, and we were new Olim, and all of that was adjustment in everything. But by the way, no secrets. It wasn't always easy. It's still not always easy. Right. But I'm so grateful. I'm so glad. My wife refers to us, probably politically incorrect, to say she calls us the Koreans. My Hebrew is not fluent. It never will be fluent. I'm good conversationally. She's good in reading or writing. Together maybe we make up a whole, and that's fine. We did it for ourselves, but we did it mostly for our kids. And now with the next generation already, a grandson who was born here, that's incredible.
Right, that's a whole nother level. I again, just listening to you speak is making all these thoughts in my head spin around, and I'm thinking of conversations I've had with my wife where she said exactly that. Of course, we benefit so much having made Aliyah. Of course, we chose to make Aliyah because we love this place. And just like you said, we feel this incredible and strong sense of place and sense of being home. But obviously, there's challenges with making Aliyah. Obviously, there's
Life.
challenges with being Olim language and all kinds of other things. But I remember my wife telling me years ago this, and it stuck with me ever since. And that we are making, we have made a sacrifice. We are sacrificing part of our lives. It would have been easier on many levels, of course, to stay in America, language, jobs, and the like, and all that kind of stuff. But we have done something that will then make it easier for our children and their children and their children to just be born here, to live here, to grow up here, to raise their children here. And now we're all here, and now we're all home. And that's an important part, I think, also of the Aliyah experience and journey.
But the trick is now, as veteran New Olim as you and I are, is not to let our kids or grandchildren and their children take for granted what we've done. I don't take for granted that my grandparents came here in the 1930s, or that whole generation, the people who laid the foundation to build this country for decades before we arrived. So we talk about that. We talk about, I think for a lot of instances, the Zionism is taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want that to be the case. I want them to be infused with the Zionism and the love that is not just a place. This is not just a place to live, but a place to make your life.
Right, 100%. And I think the more they hear us talk about it or other Olim talk about it, they can really, keep that sense alive and fresh. And that leads me to my next question. You've been here now for 16 years. Was there like a specific moment, maybe there were a few moments, but is there a specific moment you can think of now where, despite all the challenges and despite the, oh no, I hope this goes well kind of maybe feeling, there's a moment where you felt we made the right decision, we did it, this was the best thing ever for our children? Was there like some kind of moment you remember having or something?
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't the day we landed. But that actually, I felt for a moment that day that maybe we should go back to the airport.
Take the next plane back.
Yeah, but that was okay. Was there one thing? I'll tell you this. My oldest daughter was celebrating her bat mitzvah the year we made Aliyah. And she's one of my most social kids, was then and still is. And we pulled her away from not just 40 best friends, but 40 best friends Benot Mitzvah the year we made Aliyah. Wow. So we said, okay, well, it wasn't the phrase we used, but we basically bought her out as part of the Aliyah deal. We said, we will bring 4 of your friends to Israel to celebrate your bat mitzvah, which we knew we were getting away with spending a lot less money, even doing that, as compared to what we would have spent on a bat mitzvah in America anyway. Sure. And that way she had something to look forward to. And I don't remember how or when, or frankly, if she even articulated it, but by the time her bat mitzvah came around, 10 months after we made Aliyah, as I mentioned, she had already made her best friends for life. Mm. And it was nice to see her friends from America. Wow. But it wasn't any more necessary.
Wow. That's amazing. It's powerful. Very powerful. So there's so many pieces of the Aliyah journey and the Aliyah experience. And we know right now there is this strong and sharp increase in interest amongst American Jews when it comes to Aliyah. We know that, people make Aliyah for all kinds of reasons. But we also know when we look historically, America has been an anomaly for many, many decades. In fact, Jews coming from America and Aliyah come for a love of wanting to be here, a strong desire.
Correct.
To be here. But when you look at Aliyah in general, from even before the creation of the state, it's really been this kind of like, we need to leave, our time is done here. Let's go either build our state or join the state that has been built, and thank God there is that state to join. So obviously we're living in very interesting, unique, and historical times. Just very, very recently this year, in fact, because of what's going on in the world with Corona and of course the different social issues that America is going through. So, if you were going to share a thought or two about making Aliyah at this time and point, with American Jews who are newly thinking about making Aliyah, what would you say to them? What would you share with them? What would your message be to them?
I don't want to ever discourage anybody, but on the other hand, I've seen people come here trying to not run, I want to say run away from problems. And that's not really 100% accurate, but but we'll go with it for the time being. If someone thinks that they can just run away and remake themselves, they should really think strongly about that. Coming to Israel gives you opportunities to build for your future and for yourself, but come with eyes wide open. Know that there'll be challenges. And know that there'll be more challenges than you can anticipate. But by the same token, there are more blessings than you can anticipate. And all the things that I'm saying about me and my experience and my family is a privilege to be here. It's not saying that we wouldn't have had a very good life the last 16 years if we had stayed put. But I truly believe that there's that much more value here, and not just, I don't mean value to life, not in a judgmental way, but the values, the things that my kids are living and experiencing. Just the simple stuff. I grew up in New Jersey. We lived in New Jersey before we made Aliyah. When you go on school trips to New Jersey, you go every place that George Washington slept or fought, and anything that Thomas Edison invented. And those are important things. But when my kids, this sums it up really well. When your kids here go on school trips and discover the nooks and crannies of the old city of Jerusalem, or just go on a hike in the Galil, and they don't even know where they are, and it doesn't matter. But just to be able to do that, these are the immeasurable brachot that you have in living here. But you have to come with eyes wide open. Be prepared to work. It's not the golden Medina. It's not what people brought us and our families to America at whatever point that happened, looking for prosperity. They weren't looking for the Jewish homeland. They were looking for safety and prosperity. And I would say that you can be no less safe and no less prosperous here, but it's not without the elbow grease. It's not without the active intervention and knowing you're just going to feel like you're getting beat over the head sometimes, but it's okay. It's okay. It works out. It's sort of like, I don't know why it comes to mind, Dorothy at the end of The Wizard of Oz. You end up in a good place.
Right. Mamash. I often feel that, if someone's sitting down and doing a budget here in Israel, there's got to be one line on that budget that's either like faith or miracles, or I don't know how to explain it, but it all just kind of works out.
It's true. and by the way, and sometimes it doesn't, and you need to, you're right. It's faith, it's miracles, it's extra work, it's the extra measure of, if you're investing to get something out of it, then you have to put more into it. I believe that. And I think we are talking at a different time. If you and I were having this conversation 2 years ago, we'd be talking about, okay, who's drawn, maybe now's your time. And unfortunately, and I say this with deep pain, the status of Jews in America is not what it was 2 years ago. And so people were watching this who never thought of it 2 years ago. And I feel tremendous pain for that. And people like that who weren't drawn to come to Israel from 15 like I was. And we didn't talk about your story. I'm sure you've shared that with people. But whatever the motivating factor, even if it's just pushing and feeling no longer safe, comfortable, invested, whatever the word is in being in America now, okay, so this is a great place. Right. But come here with eyes wide open and make an investment which will pay off.
Right. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it, because I think when people make Aliyah, especially from America, right, and for the Americans who have been making Aliyah over the past few decades, but I think that it's still such an important thing to keep in mind for the new Olim from now, going forward, that this isn't just like living. This isn't like regular life. This isn't stam life. This is like, as you said, this is an investment. I am moving here consciously, right? Based on a very conscious decision, in order not only to keep living, continue living, but to invest in something that's like way bigger than us. It's about
That's right.
It's about their children. It's about the Jewish people. It's about the future of the Jewish people. It's about the safety of the Jewish people. It's about the quality of the Jewish people. And obviously we don't feel it every single day. You can't. You wouldn't be able to like go to work and pay your bills and like buy food for your family. But like but we know that this is still a tangible feeling that one can feel while we're living here, while we're doing all those other very kind of everyday mundane activities. And I think that's something that when people make Aliyah, they're like, wow, this is a project. I'm part of a project here. And I have to just quickly maybe just add that when I was in college, I was very involved with political activism. And I felt, this is the end of the mid to the end of 1990s. And I felt often that something big is happening. Like my generation, we're going to be part of something big. I'll be honest, that something big never really came. But then just a few short years after graduating college and reconnecting to my Jewish roots, I was about tshuva, I didn't grow up religious, whatever, that's a whole other story. But I became religious, came to Israel for the first time when I was 22, had almost identical experience to you when you came when you were 15. Within days, I felt like I can live here forever. This is my home. It doesn't make sense, but it is. But as I got more and more connected to Israel, and of course, when I made Aliyah, I remember thinking this one day, like, whoa, that big thing that I was expecting in college finally came. That big thing that I thought I was going to be part of finally came, and it's part of the Jewish people returning home. What's bigger than that? That's a 2,000-year-old story in the waiting.
Which, by the way, that's fascinating that you just said that, because when you're talking about your big thing, I guess I'm about 10 years older or so, and my big thing was in the 80s, involvement with Soviet Jewry. And that was a thing. Like there were protests, there were demonstrations, there was a cause, and when I would visit the Soviet Union and tell Jews there, yeah, you should go to Israel because it's amazing there, and I want to go. And then they looked at me and said, oh, you're an American Jew, and you have the ability to fly back and forth to the Soviet Union and tell us where we should live. I want to live in America because of all the opportunities you have there. But the movement that you're speaking of is much less specific, but it's not like something like the Soviet Jewry movement that had a definitive beginning and end point. This is an ongoing. This is all part of our history, and I refer to myself as a comma. I'm a comma on a page in Jewish history, and that's pretty cool to me. That's really cool.
Right. I mean, the fact that we can even be a comma on the page, that's like a wow, thank you,
Yep.
I mean, really, yep. And I think I really share, I viscerally feel it. I really share it in your love and respect, right, for American Jewry and diaspora Jewry and what's happening there. And we never want to come off as judgmental or telling them what they need to be doing.
No.
But at the same time, I do really think that we are in a shift right now. I think, agreeing with everything you said before, about why people make Aliyah and how people make Aliyah. I think right now we are in a shift where I think more and more American Jews are thinking about it and starting to realize, like I always look at Israel as kind of like this, like, I don't know, a little bit of a third world country, bordering on second world country maybe, but it was just so much of a nicer and easier life in America. And I think that's changing for a lot of people because of obviously what's going on in the world. And also realizing that Israel is not the same country it was in the 1950s and 60s. It's changed tremendously, and financially, quality of life, the food culture, the music culture, the sense of joy and meaning that one can feel here, and the sense of just like enjoying life, aside from all like those great and strong Zionistic values and feelings, it's a good life. And I think more and more people are waking up to that.
Right. And so I'm thinking about what brought my grandparents here and people in the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s who were fleeing wherever they were no longer comfortable or welcome. And and it was hard. It was hard. You picked up everything and you carried what you could, and you took boats or magic carpets or whatever ways people were able to get here. And by and large, despite all of the challenges, people succeeded and thrived, and that doesn't mean that people don't, but certainly they did, and we as a country have. But juxtaposing that to now, it's not to say that the ground is paved and you just have to step down and kiss it and everything's going to go perfect. It won't. But it's never, ever, ever easier to make Aliyah. It's never ever been easier to leave families and friends behind and either telecommute and make a decent living, or stay in touch with the grandparents or cousins or whomever it may be by Zoom, by Skype. You know, you don't have to carry around pockets full of a simonim in order to make a phone call after you've stood online for 40 minutes waiting to get your turn.
Right.
It's really, it's not easy, but it's never been, and it may never be easy, but it's never been easier. And even if someone is considering coming here because they are no longer comfortable and didn't have Israel on their radar before, gosh, if 250,000 Moroccan Jews could come here in the 1940s and 50s, and another 600,000 or however many hundred of thousand Holocaust survivors could come here in the 1940s and 50s, and tens of thousands of Jews from Yemen, and I mean, come on, this is child's play comparatively, and that doesn't diminish that you're out of your element, and there will be challenges.
Right, 100%, 100%. Really well put. Thank you. I think the last question I want to ask you, despite the fact that there's like a million more things I think we can talk about, but the first question I want to ask you, and it really does bring you back to the beginning of what you shared with us. You know, when you were 15, and not only feeling the sense of home, but already very interestingly, at the young age of 15, realizing and feeling at least that like this is where you would want to raise your children.
Yes.
It's amazing that you are right now. So my last question for you is like this, because I think a lot of people really share in that feeling like this is just such an amazing place to raise children. I share what I see with my students who come from America. I teach a course in Jewish history and Israel studies at a school. It's like a study abroad program for high school students here in Israel. But when I sit with them and we talk about Ben Gurion and his vision of Aliyah and Aliyah in general, and they ask me questions about what it was like for me to make Aliyah, and they always ask me, you know, at some point, like, would you ever go back? You know, would you ever go back to America? And I tell them in the 16 years, there's a couple times, you know, for sure, that my wife and I play with the idea of maybe this, and that. The first time was, as you were saying, within like the first week. We were like driving around Jerusalem, getting completely lost, couldn't read the signs. My Hebrew was like not even existent. I'm like, oh my God, I think we should go back and like move to California or something. I'm from New York. But what I tell my students is the thing that will always, 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 always cause me to answer that question, would I ever go back, with the answer no, despite all the other amazing things about living here. But the main thing, if I had to choose one, is my children and raising children here. So again, you had mentioned that as well. So if you can share about that, what is it for you about raising children here that is so amazing, special, powerful? What is it?
Well, as strange as it will sound, I love how inappropriately Israeli my kids are culturally. You know, they say and do things that never would fly if we were living in America, and that's just a great litmus test of our acculturation here. You know, I don't know. I'm thinking of the Seinfeld episode, the regifting of whatever it was that went around and around. How do you take your kids here and succeed as we have, and think about taking them away? You know, even to the point that where people have approached me about going on shlichut as a family. Like, no, I don't want. We're here. I don't want to do that. And I admire people who do. Don't get me wrong, I can't. It never entered our mind to do that. Just never on the radar. Never on the radar. And thank God. And maybe because we've been more successful than others, or had fewer challenges or stresses. And please don't anyone watching this think that we haven't. We've had more than our share, way more than our share. Nothing related to Aliyah specifically, but life. And I guess maybe the answer is the same way that we get this opportunity in life to be here. Just because bad things might happen in life doesn't mean that you should necessarily associate that with being here and then cop out on it. Now, and I know that's a judgmental phrase. A friend who just went back and very conflicted.
Right.
No, never considered it.
Right.
It would never. We never look back.
Right.
Never look
Right.
back. Wasn't even an option.
Again, as you're speaking, our oldest, we have 4 children, as I mentioned before, and our oldest are 11 and 13. And now we visit maybe America every few years, but before that, in the more early years of our Aliyah, we were going back almost every summer for a visit. And our kids, when they were younger, they go, and it was just like, it was like La La Land. It was like bowling and, the bakery and the New York City Central Park and all this fun stuff. And I remember our oldest, who's 13 now, but when he was younger, I remember him saying, hey, when I'm older, I'm moving to America. And you can imagine that was like a dagger in the heart, again, with all due love and respect, of course. But like for me, who made Aliyah, of course, it was so hard to hear. And it's so interesting as he's gotten older. And, he's, with his friends, and they're going to the beach, and they're going on bike rides, and they're making their coffee by the Mayan, and he's in Bnei Akiva, and he's going on overnight, and he's doing all these things that I never would have done at his growing up in America. The last time he went to visit America, he was like, whoa, what is this place? It was like a different world for him. And again, as much as he loves visiting my family and has still fun going to Carvel ice cream or whatever it is,
of course,
it's like he would never want to go. He would never want to live there. Like he's just become, so Israeli. Like you're saying that he couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And I think, maybe answer my own question. That's one of the greatest feelings ever we can have as Olim.
But it's not just Israeli culturally, it's also everything that comes along with it. We were speaking before offline about my mother. She was still alive when we made Aliyah. Mm-hmm. And when we told her we were coming, she said she was very unhappy. She said, you're kidnapping my grandchildren. And she meant it. That was not rhetoric for her. And yet on her first trip here, 3-4 months after we made Aliyah, which honestly was too soon, was way too soon.
Right.
But even after that, she said in tears how she's still unhappy that we left, but she saw that we've given our kids a better quality of life. And there was nothing tangible that she could point to.
Right.
And as somebody who didn't aspire to ever live here, the fact that she could see it and observe it and articulate it, that's bam.
The stamp. Yeah. So amazing. Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for your time and your sharing. And
Pleasure. Thanks for what you're doing.
So inspiring. Thank you so much. Continued success with all the great work that you're doing in this land and in the world. And hope to talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Kiva. Nice to talk to you.
All the best. Be well.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.